Okay, we'll call the Finance and Judicial meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Scott McClory,
Here.
Ken Minell,
Here.
Tim Sharota.
Here. All right, our first item is discussion regarding water fund revenues, expenses, and cash.
First off, I appreciate the council meeting quickly. You know, obviously we just reached out to you on Monday, so I appreciate everybody squeezing this in, particularly before Monday's meeting, because if depending on what you guys decide this morning, you know, obviously we would want to get on the agenda for Monday. Sort of the short story is that the water fund has definitely been, you know, facing some challenges with all the expenses that have come up the last couple of years. You know, and looking, basically, revenues have not been meeting expenses. I just say that, and certainly we're definitely having an issue with cash flow for the water fund for a couple of reasons. One, looking at, let's say 22. Well, let me back up and say the water fund last raised rates in 2017, which obviously was a while ago, and a lot has changed for the water fund since then. So, not having a rate increase in quite a while has been a problem. Looking at even 21. You know, where we had a negative cash flow of $163,000. So even back in 21, before things really started, you know, becoming challenging in terms of the DNR issues, you know, the water fund wasn't treading water. And then, you know, things obviously as they, you know, towards the end of 21 into 22, you know, the cash flow situation got worse. And, you know, looking at where the big, you know, costs were, it's not surprising that it was engineering services, equipment services, contracted equipment services. You know, just look at what was budgeted in 22, let's say, versus what was spent. I mean, it's, you know, budgeted $60,000 for engineering services and spent $350,000. So obviously right there, you're $300,000 short of what that's just one line item. So, and if you go through and add up all the, that's just one engineering line. That's not even including all the other engineering lines that were in the last year's budget. So when you add up all those, that gets you close to the, you know, 1.7, 1.8 million that, you know, in terms of why expenses were so high last year versus, let's say, you know, prior years. So certainly it's, you know, problematic, and we've been kind of trying to get a handle on what's been going on in terms of the last few years. And, you know, immediately we've already, you know, reached out, had a meeting with Ellers yesterday. Well, first off, Ellers, you know, last summer timeframe did the initial cash flow analysis last July for us, came to talk to the council. Unfortunately, you know, at that time, the recommendation was to do a conventional rate application, which is what we would like to, you know, do this year, because the deadline was passed last year, because the deadline's July. So we met with them yesterday and are moving forward with getting all the information together to submit that application here at the end of July. So I know Corey and Stephanie are going to be doing a lot of, probably Dawn to a certain extent too, will be, you know, doing information and gathering that information. But so, you know, step one is, hey, how do we get our rates to where they need to be to support the water fund right now. So the downside being that process will take time, and they're saying realistically we probably won't get any rate changes actually until 24. It just depends. We'll have a better handle on once Ellers looks at all of our information, they'll be able to tell us how soon they think the PSC will, you know, approve a rate increase. They may allow us to do it a little bit sooner, or they may want to take a longer look if they think there needs to be like a 2-step increase. So that can slow things down. So it's kind of up in the air right now until Ellers gets back to us on that. So, and what's also made this challenging is, you know, there was definitely a certain amount of expenses, let's say in 2021, 22, that were, you know, planning for, let's say, Lakeland and planning for some of these projects, which, you know, we're applying for DNR funding right now to do the projects, to do the work, but there's cash that was already expended prior to even being able to you know, submit our applications and get the funding. So we do expect to be able to get reimbursed a little bit of that money from, let's say, Lakeland in particular, where they've already done a lot of like preliminary, a lot, but they've done a you know, sizable amount of preliminary engineering work and studies and stuff. So we do think we'll get to reimburse our cash a little bit from that. once we actually get the DNR funds at the end of the year or early 24. It just depends on how long it'll take the state to give us that money. So that, that's been a challenge, and a lot of the, certainly there were a decent amount of expenses last year. I should say a lot of expenses that were for things that we really couldn't have even applied for DNR funding for. I mean, for one thing, a lot of the testing and the studies that the state wanted, was immediate. I mean, it wasn't something you could submit an application for and wait and get your money for like a year later. So there was just, unfortunately, a lot of the water funds were paid for things that were immediate. So right now we're, as I said, looking at, obviously getting the rates adjusted to, we've been in the process of applying for the DNR loans to pay for Lakeland, to pay for Northeastern, as well as the water components of East Centralia and South Wright Street. There again, the money won't actually come to us probably in hand until early 24. So it's okay, well, how do we get from here to 24? Because we were gonna, obviously Wright Street and Centralia are getting going here immediately. So we have a couple things we wanted to talk about related to that. First, with respect to the cash flow situation, the good news is that, even though, the bad news is that we're projecting, we think, okay, we could have a $1 million, cash flow, I'd say deficit, let's say between now and the end of the year. Now, I will say, trying to estimate those numbers is challenging because, again, if you look at the expenses from last year, which we were trying to use an average of last year and early part of this year, and expecting, let's say, things don't change, what it would look like. Well, it's a little bit hard because a lot of the expenses we spent last year and this year again have been certainly engineering project related. And we've tried to pull out those numbers to the extent we can, but there's definitely some murkiness because some of the engineering expenses, they didn't specifically allocate to one category. It was more like a general, water capacity and its supply. Well, okay, what does that mean? It's not really tied to like a Lakeland or a Northeastern specifically. So it's really, we don't necessarily know exactly how, what we should expect for a monthly total expenses. We're sort of estimating worst case scenario. But so if assuming worst case scenario on expenses, okay, we could have a potential cash flow deficit, like I said, of $1 million by the end of the year. So how do we meet that until we can get some of the DNR funding back, which for things we've already spent it in, to get the rates implemented. So the good news is that the city still has $780,000 in ARPA money that we haven't touched. And the good news with that is we checked with the Walworth County had that ARPA expert on retainer that we could consult with. So talked to them on Monday, and they verified that we could use all that money for operating expenses for water. So we could potentially, with council's approval, allocate the ARPA money to pay for water fund expenditures through, the end of the year, which would give us $800,000. So that would obviously be a huge help at a time when the water department's really in need. So that's, on the agenda today, there was sort of two things. Talking about ARPA. Well, first and most importantly, I wanted to tell you guys wanted to give you guys an update on the water fund, because obviously this is, of a big concern to us, and obviously the council. So I want to make you aware of it as soon as possible once we, got a good handle on where things were at. So I'll stop talking for a second in case you guys want to ask some questions about, expenditures or where the fund's at, and then we could talk, more about the solutions for moving forward.
You guys have anything?
No.
I'd take the 780,000 and apply. If it's not earmarked for some other fund or other project, we'd be foolish not to take that money.
Yeah, and right now it's not been. It's just been sitting in temporary. It's kind of gone back and forth. It was like, well, maybe they'd use it for a sewer project, and then it's just been kind of in the background, and yeah, so it's there to use. So
you need a formal motion to recommend to full council to move those funds.
Yeah, and that
A motion from either one of you, David?
I'll make that motion to move the funds over.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll send it to full council on Monday.
great. And
Obviously, one of you is going to have to take the ball with that because I won't be here. So
I know I have a we'll have a draft resolution, or not draft, we'll have a resolution for Monday, documenting where we're at. And what the funds would, where they'd go. So,
And then part B on what you said earlier was a rate increase.
yep.
Do you want to still do more investigating? I think I heard you correctly. You guys are going to circle back and say, okay, I think 3% or 2% or whatever.
Once they get the numbers together, though.
Okay, so you don't need any formal action on that right now.
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to let you know kind of all the things that we're trying to figure out what to do. And that will be something Ellers is tentatively going to come in July,
Okay.
present to you guys and basically be, hey, this is what Ellers' findings are and what our application to the PSC would be.
And these numbers too are, for 22, are still kind of preliminary. Our auditors are here today actually to work on some of it. So once we figure out what expenses are being capitalized and stuff, that might shift things a little bit. So it might not be as it is on paper, but
Okay.
hoping a little less, but still that.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from you guys on item 3 or 4?
No, I think though that we didn't know, but all of a sudden we did know where we were at with, with our water division.
Sure.
And this has been building up over the years. I mean, and to make sure that we go forward to straighten that out and get it where it should be, I think is very important for everybody, the community involved too. Because,
Rates.
yeah,
Every 2 years or every year basis, there's a quicker application you can do for just a short increase each year if need be.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't, and you guys already know this, that you could do like what they call like a simple rate, simplified rate adjustment, which is a much simpler process. But the problem is we're not eligible because, and this seems counterintuitive, but if you haven't applied for a rate increase more than 5 years, I think it is, then you can't do the simplified, which seems like, seems odd. But so as a result, we can't even apply for just a simplified one now and then have it take effect now. We have to do the more, the longer conventional rate case, which is why it's going to take longer. So going forward, it'd be good if we could, once we get this conventional rate case, to be, trying to take advantage of the simplified rate increases going forward in the future. So the other thing related to this is about, okay, as I mentioned, we've got all these, water projects that we're working on right now. We're applying for funding now with the DNR. But these projects are ongoing, particularly Centralia and South Wright Street. Obviously, they're about breaking ground. So we anticipate all those water costs we're going to have to pay for by the end of the year, by the time we get the DNR money. And then we're working on the engineering side of Lakeland and Northeastern, which again, we'd expect, okay, let's say they spend all the engineering money that they've told us that the engineering design would cost by the end of the year. So how are we going to pay for that until the DNR money comes in? So we estimate it could be up to, $2.5 million of water funding that we would potentially pay out. Again, if you combine the engineering and all the actual construction costs. So in terms of finding the interim financing until we get the DNR money, how are we going to do that? So a couple options. We talked to Ellers about this too. I mean, we could go, to a local bank or find a bank to give us the loan. Obviously, then there's going to be, paying a higher interest rate and, the costs associated with that. Alternatively, we could do an interfund loan and just borrow from other funds. So you'll see there's a sheet in front of you, kind of a detailed sheet. This is the unrestricted cash, on the right side. This is the unrestricted cash in some of the main funds, general, sewer, water, and electric. And, I guess I don't know if I'd say our proposal, but one option would be to borrow up to $1.25 million as an interfund loan from the electric and from the sewer fund, basically through the end of the year. And then once the DNR money comes in, then just you pay those funds back. So that's one option. Or if you'd prefer, we can go outside the city and use third-party interim financing. So that's the sort of other big question for today. So
Well, I think if we can do it internally, why go to
I
a
pay the
bank?
interest rate, right?
Right. I agree. Do you need a formal action on that or formal motion on that too?
yeah, so I mean,
I guess I move we take, what'd you say, 1.25 million from both the sewer fund and the electric fund to cover the shortfall until it can be repaid by the DNR. Is that too wordy?
No, that's
You get that, Lacy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? My only question is, we do the intergovernmental loan transfer. what if the DNR says, gosh, we were wrong, we're only giving you 200,000, not 2.2 million or whatever we applied for, we're still gonna be, then how do we make it up to these guys?
Yeah, and I asked that question to, I asked that question to Foth, who's working on our DNR applications. I said, what are the chances that we don't actually get the DNR funding? And their exact response was,
We're the government, we're here to help you,
uh,
wasn't it? Okay.
they said, well, I mean, they just said it's unlikely. I mean, they said it could happen, but they thought it was unlikely that we would have that happen. So if it does happen, then we're gonna have to find it somewhere else. I mean, I know that's a terrible answer, but
No, I mean, that's the questions we're gonna be asked,
Yeah.
or any of these people sitting at the table are gonna be asked, you know, I just wanna make sure we have, what's plan B? You
The
know?
interest rate is a lot higher elsewhere, so
Right.
our best option is.
Oh, for sure. I totally agree with Tim's motion and Kenny's second. I'm just asking what happens if they say, gosh, we missed whatever, or we changed our minds, or, you know, what are we gonna do to make up that money? We're gonna have to do that? Or we're gonna have to say no to a different project, or, you know, do something.
yeah, I mean, at a minimum, we would have to absolutely not move forward with some of the water projects. Now, how we then reimburse the electric and the sewer fund for what's been borrowed thus far, that's gonna be another question.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. Motion passes, and we'll send that to full council on Monday as well. If it's on the agenda, I assume it's on the agenda, or will be. We don't want to drag our feet on that.
And again, we'll have a resolution for that as well, so.
Right. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's,
Any motion to adjourn?
so move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, stand adjourned.